don't even know who may want to say some things at the end. The only rule I've been given is that anything that can't be said in 3 minutes, except for me, anything that can't be said in 3 minutes can't be said. And I make 2 rules of my own. If anybody waxes at all maudlin or even reverent,
What do you mean?
I'm going to pull the hook. So use that as a guide. I'm going to get to talk again at the end, and I'm going to answer the question that's on everybody's mind of why the big guy decided to cash out. And I know why. A lot of people are speculating about different reasons, but I know the answer, and I'll be glad to tell you if you stay long enough to listen. But I thought I'd start at the beginning to tell some of you who probably don't know how this actually happened in the first place, how Truman became a judge, because I was there. In 1978, there was a problem. Truman had risen up to the head of the trial division of the Public Defender Service, beyond which it was clear he would not go. And his role as the head of the trial division was to advise the trial lawyers, of course. And the problem was that Truman had never tried a case. He had second chaired a few cases, had a couple of witnesses, but never really had one of his own. Now, to give credit where credit is due, he had negotiated some really good pleas. He had spent thousands of dollars of public funds hiring expert witnesses, and he virtually invented the post-Vietnam stress syndrome and a number of other mental illnesses that nobody had ever heard before. And he would create these completely bogus defenses, have experts to back them up. He would walk into the prosecutor's office and persuade them that they couldn't possibly win, and say, "Give me a misdemeanor," and he got it. And so his clients were all well represented in that way. But the problem arose when he became the head of the trial division, because the trial lawyers would then come to Truman and say, they asked for strategy for their trials. They'd say, what's the best line of defense here?
Shut up,
Or they might say, what kind of a jury do I want for this particular case? And Truman said, don't worry about a jury. Hire Harold Kaufman. Tell him to say that the guy has frontal lobe epilepsy. Tell the prosecutor you want a misdemeanor, and you'll get a good plea. Unfortunately, he was dealing with not just any lawyers. These were really good lawyers. Michelle is here; she remembers this. Mark is here. Bernie Grimm. A lot of other lawyers, and they would say, "My client's innocent." Or he wants a trial. I can't. Tim was sorry, you'll have to go somewhere else. So the word began to filter up to the director of the Public Defender Service, and it was clear that something had to happen, and a mutual decision was made that Tim had to leave. The problem was that there was nothing he was equipped to do. He had done only 2 other things in his adult life. One was an aborted attempt to manage a rock and roll band. He and Coleman had found this guy, and they were determined that they could make their living off of him. To say the least, he was a little unreliable, and they'd book engagements and he wouldn't appear, and that venture went nowhere. And the only other thing that I know, and I know a fair amount, that he had done was to sell cars. So he, when he knew he had to leave the Public Defender Service, put a lot of effort into a deal to open up a BMW dealership in Annapolis. He and Bill Pease went high enough so they are actually talking to regional managers and people from Montvale, New Jersey, and they really got pretty far along. Borax was going to bankroll the thing when he still had an inheritance to invest in it. And it actually looked like a pretty good deal. But when he finally got to the top level and they were about to put the ink on the paper, the guy said, there isn't enough of a market for BMWs in Annapolis. You need to also sell I don't know, Toyotas or Nissans, but it's accurate, right? Truman, who was such a purist about BMW, said, I won't sell anything else. And he had such a poor head for business that he didn't realize that the business was in Toyotas and Nissans and not in BMWs. So the guy said, take a hike, and that was the end of that deal. And so Truman was really about to be without anything to do. And so he thought about it for a minute, and that's the solution to the problem came to him, that he had been my campaign manager about 6 or 8 months earlier when I was trying to get on the Superior Court. And just so I didn't have to do all of it, he called a lot of people on my behalf and told them what a great guy this was, and he really ought to help him get on the court. And he made a lot of contacts, and so that shamelessly, he then recalled all these same people and said, remember I told you about this guy 6 or 8 months ago? Well, now I need a job. Can you help me? And of course, the Public Defender Service put all their muscle behind it because they had a problem with the trial division. So he gets far enough to get to the Nomination Commission and then the White House, and they look at him and they look at him and they say, he doesn't look like any judge we've ever appointed before. But all these people were calling and saying he's just like Weisberg. He's really going to be good. So that actually is very close to the true story of how Truman got here in the first place. And at the end of this, if there's still time, I'll tell you about why he's cashing out. The first person that has signed up to speak is Mark Rochon, wherever he is, and then if anybody forgets the order they're supposed to go in, I'll prompt them.
Appeared in front of Truman Morrison, the judge, and my job is to tell you just what that's like. He comes out, he sits down. There's a lawyer rolling around in the aisle saying, Mr. Smith! Mr. Smith! Judge Morrison says, Attorney Jones, can we help you find your client tonight? Because one of his pet peeves is a lawyer who doesn't recognize his client. And then they get the case up there and he says, my tentative view in this matter. Which is like Moses comes with the tablets. It's already etched in the tablet. He says, my tentative view is thou shalt not kill. This is his my tentative view. So it's a very gentle thing. My tentative view here is probably that a term of incarceration is inappropriate. And then you have to kick in as the defense lawyer, in my role, to try and persuade him otherwise from this so-called tentative view. The only other thing you need to learn about Judge Morrison is never let him pee. And I say this because you're up there, you're doing a good job, you're persuading him, the evidence should be suppressed, the police officer's lying. He's going, yeah, they were lying, and they're not telling the truth. There's these inconsistent statements. And he says, I agree. The court's going to take a short recess and come back and announce his ruling. And you're like, with your client, you're in the hallway, high-fiving, you're going home, case is going to be dismissed, probably get the drugs back too, this guy's pretty good. It's looking very, very good. The man comes back out, he says, the motion's got to be suppressed, let's pick a jury. As something would happen from the moment he would leave the bench to go back into chambers, and he's probably right. Talks to you, talks to Richter, talks to somebody, I don't know who he's talking to. But he's not talking to the right people. We'll get to that in a minute. No, but the other thing that he would do that would be highly entertaining is the absolute unwillingness to tolerate bad lawyers. And so, just nothing that any of you could possibly imagine doing, he would do. So this is my last story of this whole thing. I could go on for hours. But the last thing I'll tell you is the first time I met him, I'm at PDS, I'm a duty day lawyer. I'm brand new. They said there's a judge who needs a lawyer from PDS. I go over. I walk in, the first thing he does is make fun of your clothes. What's your name? You're from PDS, and he's supposed to be a god because he's from PDS, Judge Morrison. That's an interesting tie you have on, or something like that. But then he says, Attorney Jones here has indicated that he thinks his client is incompetent. The government has announced they're not ready for trial. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Do you think you could assist Mr. Attorney, whatever his name is, who said that his client is incompetent even though the government's not ready? I say, yeah. we're ready for trial. He says, you haven't talked to your client, you don't know anything. I said, we're ready for trial. Right now, me and this man are going to trial. And he thought that was a good idea. He says, but there's a concern about his competency here. I said, well, I'll go talk to him. Go back in the cell block. He tells me a few stories about Neil Young. I come back out. I said, this man is competent. We're still ready for trial. And he made the right ruling. This is a DWIP, right? This is a DWIP. This is a misdemeanor count, and the case goes away. Ultimately, no maudlin stuff, so I won't say anything that, but it is the case that but for him, I never would have gotten out of PDS myself with Gary Coleman, wouldn't have gotten to wherever I am right now, and it is all of a piece with helping out young lawyers, which I thank him greatly. That's not maudlin at all. And then ultimately, he was such an example to lawyers with PDS who come over there, and he could make sure that the standards were elevated, that bad lawyers got the blues, so they wouldn't go to his courtroom, and he'd see more of the good lawyers. Perisic.
Will Barry.
Will Barry.
Hi, I clerked for Judge Morrison in 1996, so I'm here to tell you a little bit about what it's like to clerk for the judge. There are many clerks here, and many stories they can tell you, and they're going to do that a little bit later when the judge is out of earshot, because we've all made promises. Your first day as a clerk for Judge Morrison, you do some frantic perusal of a criminal procedure anthology, and you jump on the Metro, and you want to make sure you're on time, because Judge Morrison is a stickler for punctuality. I was on Italian time my first day. I showed up a week late. I was in Venice, and I kept getting engaged, and I come back and there's some messages. The judge loved that, and actually I think he's forgotten it. But you walk into chambers, and I remember the Iron Fist speech. You're not through the doorway when you're sat down, and you hear, Barry, this is serious business. There's a certain way we do things around here, and if you don't follow procedure, you're out of here. I remember being a little bit taken aback, and in the meekest voice I could manage, I said, yes, Lorraine. But could I see the judge now, please? And eventually I did get to see the judge. And you walk into the judge's office, and as the law clerk, you're not really sure what to expect, and you have this sort of Oliver Wendell Holmes thing in the back of your head. And the first thing you see when you walk into the office, you don't see the Atlantic Seconds, you don't see the DC Code. The first thing you see when you walk into the office is this concert poster of The Who behind his chair, you know, Pete Townsend in the shadow. And I'm thinking to myself, it's not what I expected. But a few minutes later, you're talking about pretrial release and the bail statute. One thing is the judge, no bail statute. And I'm thinking this is a little bit more normal. And then this sort of tornado comes flying through the office, and you hear the laughing first, and he's just running through, and the judge, you're there about 10 minutes at this point, and the judge jumps up and screams, Willie! And you turn, and there's this 10-gallon hat, the judge's robe, and the judge's cowboy boots, and he is flying through the office. And again, not what you expect. One of the great things about clerking for the judges, you really get an education in making some of the finer distinctions. Bicameral, as in the legislature, as opposed to twin cam, is in the overhead shaft of a '69 Mustang. Merle Haggard, I wasn't lucky enough to have a lot of exposure to Merle Haggard, and I've gained an appreciation for him, particularly when he's played someplace else. You also really get an appreciation for how many car magazines are published in the United States right now. Mark mentioned that one thing about Judge Morrison is that he has some concerns when he doesn't think that particularly defendants being provided with quality representation. And I do remember, my memory is a little different from Mark's. I remember the warmth in the courtroom. I remember, counsel, that was an absolutely marvelous speech. And I want to thank you for making me a part of it. Do you have anything to say? The the tentative thinking, I was going to say myself, counsel, my tentative thinking is that that may be the most ridiculous argument I've ever heard. And I might have been better off listening to your chair. But if you'd like to continue, please. One very quick story I wanted to mention, because another thing that stuck with me about Judge Morrison is, and it goes back to the bail statute thing earlier, the only way you can get Judge Morrison angry at you as a law clerk is if you don't let him know that somebody's filed a bond motion, and if you don't set a hearing. And when I say bond motion, it's a pretty loose term. We had a bond motion once from a certain Mr. Wooten, and it came in the form of a song. Mr. Wooten sang the blues, and he had reason to. He had 18 prior convictions, and he was in jail on his 55th arrest. And I opened the envelope, and it said, "Dear Mr. Morris, I would like to be released from jail. See attached." And attached was Mr. Wooten's latest composition entitled "Don't Do Drugs." I was not asked to perform, and I won't, but the song went something like this: "Don't do drugs, don't do drugs, repeat refrain." This was a bad song and a worse bond motion. Mr. Wooten, though, got his hearing. He got his hearing right away. I won't tell you what the result was. Mr. Wooten will tell you that Mr. Morrison gave him the blues. Lastly, the best gift that Judge Morrison has given me, and I'm very comfortable saying this, saying that it applies to all his law clerks, is that he is a fantastic teacher. He'll challenge you, but you'll learn something. He will teach you in the courtroom. He'll teach you on his rooftop lounge. He will teach you anywhere within a half mile of Bourbon. And you will learn his love for the courtroom, and you'll learn his love for the law. And so for me, at least, I'd like to thank you, Judge, for teaching me those things. And I will not forget them, and will not let you forget me.
My name is Nikki Monty, and I also was a law clerk for Judge Morrison. It's funny that I should be following Will Barry, because Will and I spent some time talking about last week, probably, about what you could say about being a law clerk for Judge Morrison, and what you definitely shouldn't say about being a law clerk for Judge Morrison. And one of the things we pretty much agreed that shouldn't be said was, was how hysterically funny Judge Morrison could be in ridiculing mercilessly whatever hapless corporation counsel or defense attorney with the intelligence of a pea or prosecutor with the courtroom presence of a rhinoceros or colleague with the personality of a wet dish rag. Had most recently offended his deep, abiding, lasting, and as it turns out, well-earned conviction that he could do better, whatever the person who was being criticized was doing. And I know there's one person who spent so much time with Judge Morrison over the years, Lorraine Hamilton. Been with him since PDS and through the decades. And I know she's seen and heard it all, and I'm certain for that reason that she won't be aghast as I repeat one of my favorite Judge Morrison stories that involves Lorraine Hamilton. You know, this won't surprise any of you, that the typical day in Judge Morrison's chambers and in his life when I was his law clerk was that there would be maybe a 45-minute lunch recess during which there were 2 to 3 neglect hearings scheduled and at least one important lunch date with some friend or another. And probably a phone call to the car repair shop, and also there might need to be Mark Rochon or Gary Coleman had to be consulted about who had the season tickets for the Orioles game that night. And so all these things had to be fit into a very small time frame. And I recall one day in particular, there was not only all these normal things, but there was one neglect hearing that was involved, I think, 10 siblings and a myriad of people, and it was particularly protracted and troublesome, and Judge Morrison had gone to the trouble in this particular case of appointing a psychiatrist to interview various participants and come up with some solution for the family's problems. And for some reason or another, there hadn't been a time frame. The psychiatrist hadn't been able to commit either to 11 o'clock or to 1 o'clock or whatever the situation was. And so it was critical, as we left chambers that morning to go to do the morning calendar, that Lorraine was instructed, if Marty Byer calls, you need immediately to call the following 12 people and set up this hearing that involves so many players. So off we went. Came back on a morning recess and walked in, and Judge Morrison's not a quiet person, and as we came down the hall, you could hear him sort of lamenting. Well, we can fit in these 17 things in these 40 minutes. If only we knew Dr. Byer's availability. So we come into chambers. Of course, Lorraine's on the phone. But she's been instructed, the moment Dr. Byer calls, you have to let me know, and then you have to call these 12 people. There's apparently no message. We sit for 5 minutes, talk, and on the way out the door, Lorraine's still on the phone. Judge Morrison says, Lorraine, did Marty Byer call? And Lorraine, as only she could, and as only she developed this rapport with the judge over the years, looked at him and said, Truman, she called an hour ago. What do you want me to do? And Judge Morrison, without missing a beat, grabbing the list of 12 people he would then himself call from the courtroom, looked at her and said, Lorraine, thanks for showing up. Judge Morrison, thanks for showing up. Thanks for being. Thank you for the most entertaining, informative, inspiring
You're getting referenced.
year of my life. And thank you for being the most gutsy, cowboy boot wearing, kick-ass judge there ever was.
Hi, my name is Warren Van Hook. I'm Judge Morrison's present courtroom clerk. About a month ago, Judge Morrison was taking a guilty plea from a woman named Miss Brown. During the Rule 11 inquiry, he paused and asked, do I know you from somewhere? You look very familiar. Miss Brown responded, Judge, I was in court before you about 20 years ago. So the Rule 11 inquiry resumed, the guilty plea was accepted, and Judge Morrison prepared to impose sentence. And he asked, Miss Brown, do you have anything to say before I impose sentence? She said, yes, Judge, you sure have gotten fat and old. Judge Morrison erupted in laughter along with the rest of the courtroom and asked, Ms. Brown, do you think it's a good idea to tell the judge who's about to sentence you that he's old and fat? And she responded, Judge, I had to tell you what I was thinking.
She said, because you really are old.
Well, Ms. Brown was placed on probation.
Yeah, really.
Let me me start by saying that my father is just about the most generous, kind, funniest person I know. And I love always waking up in the mornings and seeing his smiling face looking at me. And I always love, I love what he does about so much and how he cares about other people and how he goes out of his way to help. One thing I love about him is every night at dinner he talks about the world. We talk about how many people in the world don't have enough to eat. My parents tend to give away a lot of things, but they don't seem to mind too much that we don't have a lot of money, especially because we're all together as a family and have a lot of fun, especially listening to music and dancing in the living room and going to concerts. I know my friends think I'm really lucky to have a dad who loves to take me to all the concerts he goes to. My dad always sets the greatest examples for me. For instance, he never swears or exaggerates. He never swears, no. I hear him in the kitchen cooking up, dinner going, oh, God dang it, how did I do that? Oh, gee golly gosh. He also sets great examples by telling me of his school days and how he was perfect and never did anything wrong. It's absolutely wonderful. He always has wonderful persuasive ways of getting people to do things. For instance, by going, Willie, I love you so much. You will be my favorite child if you just go get me the mop from downstairs. Or I'll let you stay up an extra 10 minutes if you get me a glass of water. But there are things that I'm very proud of my dad. For instance, when he was younger, he left college for a while to go to the South and do work in the civil rights movement. I know he was in jail a lot and risked his own life so that other people could have their rights. I expected him to do many other things that he has accomplished in his life. As you can see, I'm so lucky to have my dad. I only hope that I can turn out to be just like him in every way as possible when I grow up. And I hope we'll be around home more now that and he does not get into another stressful job too soon.
I'd just like to say I'm truly proud of what all my dad has accomplished in his entire life. He has been a very influential person in my life in too many ways to describe. He has shown me how to be a great role model. He has taught me many lessons like how to be courageous or how to take chances with life. He has also taught me to love baseball, Corvettes, and Chinese food. But the moments I treasure most with my father are those that involve music. As far back as I can remember, I have memories of my early childhood. But I don't remember anything about my actual early years of life, except the music my father played in the living room. I remember sitting on the floor with my toys, listening to Dwight Yoakam echo throughout the neighborhood. I recollect Christmas parties with Darlene Love and Marvin Gaye, and New Year's Eve with Jimi Hendrix and Merle Haggard. Last summer, my father and I spent 1 week in Austin, Texas by ourselves, in a beautiful hotel overlooking the city. I played guitar at a camp all day while my father relaxed, and then at night we'd go out to blues clubs and get hamburgers. We'd return and go out onto our beautiful terrace for a bowl of cereal before bed. Those were the greatest 6.5 days of my life. Now there's an artist that probably had the most influence on my dad in his entire lifetime that he recently introduced me to. Now this artist didn't have the greatest voice, but the words he chose in his songs and the poetic language really inspired me. My brother and I would like to dedicate this song to our dad, and you all can sing along if you'd like.
My brother's guitar teacher and my future father's guitar teacher, Eric Weinberg. And this is our great family from Lorraine. And my dad's.
I'll say one thing. Being your law clerk was and always will be the best job I ever had.
Come up a little closer because we don't
Yeah.
have the
We don't have a mic.
Put the mic back. Is the mic Eric? Eric, turn the mic out or not? No, I turned the mic off. All right.
say beware doll, you bound to fall. You thought they were all just kidding you. You used to laugh about everybody that was hanging out. Now you don't talk so loud. Now you don't seem so proud about having to be scrounging around for your next meal. How does it feel? How does it feel to be on your own with no direction, no, like a complete unknown, like a rolling stone. Fine school, alright, Miss Lonely, but you know you only gonna have to get juiced in it. Nobody's ever taught you how to live out on the street, and now you're gonna have to get used to it. You said you'll never compromise with the mystery tramp, but now you realize he's not selling any alibis. As you stare into the vacuum of his eyes and say, do you want to make a deal? How does it feel? How does it feel to be on your own with no direction, home, like a complete unknown, like a rolling stone? How does it feel to be on your own with no direction, home, like a complete unknown, like a rolling stone? You never turned around to see the frowns on the jugglers and the clowns when they all came down to do tricks for you. You never understood it ain't no good. You shouldn't let other people get your kicks for you. You used to ride the chrome horse with your diplomats, who carried on his shoulder his
start us off. This is Truman's brother-in-law, George Herbeck.
Hi, folks. This is not a poem. I wouldn't dignify it by calling it a poem. It's a ditty. And I thought that by the time I got around to sharing this with you all, we would have really gotten the lowdown on Truman. But nobody has delved into his past at all.
Neither will you.
Which is rather sordid. But we won't go into that. Anyway, Truman and the rest of you all who are gathered here this evening, I just share this with you. Are you ready? Ready! Okay. Came on a visit to D.C. way back in '83. Went to Superior Court to see the judge in action. And from the entrance security guard, I got this reaction. And I tell you the truth, really, this is no lie. The guard said, "That bench man is my favorite guy. Bushy beard and cowboy shoes. He's our own judicial muse. Friendly, and truly fair for all the folks. The man really cares." For 20 years, Tim and I have been, Tim, you got that, Tim? Tim and I have been family, and I want you to know that we've shared a lot more than absolute and wild turkey. And with that guard, I absolutely would agree. He may be Truman III, Jr.'s son, but as for me, he's number one.
I'm 10 years Truman's junior, whether or not you can tell. So when he was 16 and I was 6, I grew up with this strange grating voice over the phonograph, and I just didn't know who this voice was for so many years, and learned when I grew up that this was Bob Dylan. And it's kind of in my bones, the music of Bob Dylan. So Susie asked me to sing something tonight, and I thought I would look for a Bob Dylan song, and I thought this one most appropriate for my brother, who truly is a child at heart. May God bless and keep you always. May your wishes all come true. May you always do for others and let others do you. May you build a ladder to the stars and climb on every round, and may you stay shoes. And may your heart always be joyful, and may your song always be sung, and may you stay forever young. Forever young. Forever young. Will you stay forever young? Love you.
It's coming to us from Cambridge, Massachusetts by video, but we're going to skip over him for the time being, and next will be Judge Milliken.
I thought if I got to follow Ogletree, I'd never have to say anything. Robin, would you help me with this? After all these performances, I'm going to need some help. I met this wild man on the street, and he appeared kind of like the ghost of all holidays past, and he said, "Milliken, you deadbeat, if you see Morrison tonight, will you give him this letter from President Clinton?" And he said, "If you see Mary Kennedy there, ask her when she made parole." So I have from the White House, who is stationary to prove it, this letter from William Jefferson Clinton. "Dear Judge Morrison, many are greatly troubled by news of your taking senior status. Secretly, I am hopeful that you may become available to afford me counsel in matters requiring the utmost discretion. But this is written on behalf of others to implore you to reconsider your decision. Those who love you report that you only took the job because you and some guy named Weisberg failed to get the leads in The Odd Couple. Everyone tells me if the court has to lose one of you, let Weisberg go race car. Because he so unfortunately seeks the title of Judge Forever. Jimmy Carter called me the other day, and after pleasantries over the comparative merits of lusting in one's heart, he implored me to move you to stay. He was so impressed by your candor in your White House interview. For my part, I could not believe you told so much of the truth. In researching the matter further, Hillary and I have discovered that there never has been a judicial candidacy quite like yours. And for those who don't know this history, there's not a word of untruth in what I'm about to utter. During your White House interview, President Carter learned that you worked for the Public Defender Service, but made most of your money on the outside selling BMWs. It was revealed that beyond representing prostitutes, you had one of them move into your home to live with you. And true story. We need to talk about this now that Hillary's moving to New York. We're not sure how this next entry fit into the PBS statutory mandate, but you also represented a transvestite rock and roll band. With all this on the side, we're puzzled as to how your financial situation deteriorated in such a fashion. The next entry reflects that at the time you were interviewed for this position of trust, integrity, and resolution of fiduciary responsibilities, you were maxed out at over 14 different lending institutions. In no way should this letter be mistaken for a letter from Dick Nixon to Fred Weisberg. Although we have assurances from one Kirby Howlett that this appeal is supported by all past presidents. In all seriousness, all agree that Your Honor put the Superior in Superior Court Your colleagues who owe everything they learned to your training sweat sessions are parading up and down the streets of the District of Columbia singing, albeit badly by comparison with your family, "Won't you come home, Truman Morrison?" Of course, so I'm told, are Susie Truman and Slick Willie. Thank you for naming the last one after me, and I remain very truly yours, William Jefferson Clinton, President of the United States of America. Nothing could follow those former acts. But you'll be blubbering after this one. Yes, you will.
You just let me come and do this program a little
She
bit.
gets a pass on the log.
No, this is from one of your old PDS buddies, In Spirit. I think Kirby would be with you today. He would absolutely love honoring you in this way. But I brought something from home, a present from him. Kirby had one glass that no one in the house was allowed to use except him. It was a crystal glass that he drank his bourbon and soda out of, and only Kirby was allowed to use it. And I think that he would like you to have it, and he would love to toast you. Christy told me I had to say this. I have to say, to Truman, my liege, may your shadow never grow less. And this is from Kirby. And I give you his glass. And Truman, you have to have a glass to make sure you get not too much of that.
It's all yours, buddy. Where's Jackson?
I'm going to be necessarily brief.
No!
But I do want to tell you one thing that it really doesn't involve Judge Morrison at all. It involves Judge Weisberg, quite frankly. Some of you may have noticed, but he looked a little bit comfortable up here holding the mic. And many of you don't know Fred the way I know Fred, in the hallway, and the man is deep into hip-hop. And oh, you think Beach Boys and stuff, you don't know Fred. I'm telling you, he took every ounce of restraint that he had. And he was holding this mic up here and doing like this. But enough about it. I had the pleasure of being both a lawyer in front of Judge Morrison and as well as being his colleague. And some of my best memories of Judge Morrison is when he was in C-10. And C-10 sort of gets the pressure up and whatnot. And there's sort of, I think the scene that I'd like to describe is a hypothetical scene. It really doesn't exist. But if you can imagine Judge Morrison on the bench and a case being called and an attorney coming up who has a sort of a long black shoulder bag, got a sort of white-haired, and he sort of sits down and doesn't have a legal pad or anything, but has folded sort of crumpled paper as his client comes walking out of the cell block to the right, and the charges are read, and he begins,
Your Honor, the first thing I'd like to do is waive a formal reading of the information and enter a plea of guilty on behalf of my client. The posted dates are acceptable, and I'd ask for, do you want to go home? Well, she says she wants to go home. She's a light. Where you from? And she says that she's from out of town, but she'd like to make D.C. her home. Quiet, your attitude. You have a bad attitude. That's the problem. Well, Your Honor, so I'm asking for her release, and...
Judge Morrison, I take it the government has some position. Your Honor, she's charged with a Bail Reform Act violation, She's got 10 Bail Reform Act violations. She's got 4 pending Bail Reform Act violations. We're asking for a $10,000 surety bond. Surety bonds? Did you say surety bonds? Do you realize how long it took us to get rid of surety bonds? There will be no surety bonds. Later on that night, in the middle of the night, he wakes up screaming. And of course, Susie has to comfort him. She says, oh, surety bonds, surety bonds. Dear, calm down. Now, when you asked him about, and there was one thing that he would get apoplectic about, surety bonds. And he would say, whenever I turned to him and I'd say, ask him something about a legal question or something along those lines, he'd say, look, ask Burgess, it's a case. He knows the cases. But when you would ask him about surety bonds, he would begin quoting Blackstone commentaries. Lord Cook, 4 wheat, 3 cranch. Every single case, Gerstein, he'd say, did you know that Gerstein, he actually was Janet Reno's boss, and he knew everything that there was about bonds. I tried a case in front of Judge Morrison, and it was myself and Dennis Sweet from the Public Defender Service. And it was rough going. For both me and Mr. Sweet. Mr. Sweet was, Dennis was, and he and I got along fine, and I was just basically saying, it's your turn, Mr. Sweet. So he was going on and cross-examining my witnesses left and right, and Judge Morrison would interrupt him and saying, if I hear the word, and you're under oath one more time, I'm going to pull my hair out. And we sat there one time, and I will never forget this, as we sat there, and I'm trying to be humble, as we're standing there, and Judge Morrison is just livid that there was this legal question that came up that none of us were prepared for. And he's yelling, and he's ranting, and he's on a speakerphone. And he turns, and I said, well, Your Honor, it's really as much my fault as it is Mr. Sweet's. I said, quite frankly, it just skipped my attention. He said, it was to you that I was directing my comments. But I'm going to miss him as a colleague and as a judge, and particularly in the last year when we got to work very close together. Good luck to you and Godspeed.
Hi, I'm Henry Green. We've got a prop here, Vanna Wiggins, excuse me. The next best thing. Well, you're in trouble. I've been taking some notes tonight. I knew Tim a little bit when I was in the U.S. Attorney's Office and he was in PDS, but we really got to know each other on the court. And I respect Morrison. I love him. I turn to him for advice all the time. I get reversed a lot. But I've always wanted to be like